So today we'll be trying to fix one of my old drawings, and I'm just going to look at the anatomy, the perspective, and I think we can learn a lot from it because, as you can see, yeah, this doesn't look great. There are a couple things that stand out to me immediately. We've got the face, with the ear in particular. We've got the hands, the clothing. I think the shoulders and the hips is also something I need to look at, and then the hair. Yeah, that could also use some work. So let's get started. Every drawing starts with the proportions, and the head is a popular landmark we use to measure that. And in this case, the torso is around 1.5 heads tall, which is way too short. It works if you're trying to go with a chibi art style, but original artist is sitting right here. This was not meant to be a chibi art style. If you want to get your proportions right, what I usually do is I start by deciding where I want the top of the head and the crotch to be. And then from there you can draw a line between them and then split this line up into however many head proportions you want. So in this case, I want to do around 3.5 heads for the head plus the torso, which means the legs are going to be around 3.5 as well, because usually you want the upper torso and the legs to be the same length, but of course that can vary. Next, we'll be taking a look at the head, because as you can see, there's a lot wrong with this thing. So first we have the ear. Technically, you can place the ear wherever you want. It kind of depends on the character's design. But I think, as you all know, the common proportion, or I guess the realistic proportion, is to place the ear in between the bottom of the nose and the eyebrows, which in this case, yeah, I'm going to place the ear right around there. The nose is going to be somewhere around there. And then that is going to be the eyebrow. So that's basically what this should have been. Another thing that seems to be missing from this drawing is the angle of the jaw, which would be this point right here. On male characters, this angle is usually a bit more pronounced than it is on female characters. Like on a guy, we'd probably do something like that. It'd be a lot sharper. But it still exists on women. But in this drawing, it practically doesn't exist, and if it does, it's really high up, like it's almost lined up with the eyes. If we go off of our 2D diagram that we just drew, if that's the bottom of the nose, then the corner of the jaw would be about halfway in between the bottom of the nose and the chin. If we're going off of this nose, which I think we will, because I think the nose is actually in a decent position. I might have to adjust everything else, but yeah, let's just go off of that and that. So then the angle would be somewhere around there. Now for the eyes, something I always point out in basically every single one of my videos is that they have to be horizontally aligned, and in this case, this eye is a little too high up. And on top of that, it's also tilted in a direction, whereas this one is just perfectly straight. So if we're going to fix this, the main thing we'll have to do is just make this eye a little smaller and then straighten it out so it actually looks in the same direction as this one. The next thing I want to point out would be this side of the face. I'm pretty sure I've made videos about this before, but we can look at it again. So the main issue would be the cheekbone being non-existent and the brow ridge being pushed way too far out. If we take a look at the skull, you can see that the brow bone up here and the cheekbone down here are practically vertically aligned. On the skull it's a little different, but normally there's also fat from the cheek here, so then it checks out. But yeah, on this drawing, got the brow bone there, and then the cheekbone is practically non-existent, which means there's no room for this eye socket to exist. So if we wanted to fix this, we would draw the brow bone, then go down to the eye socket, then draw the cheekbone, and then from there we would go back into the chin. But yeah, moving on to the clothing. So there isn't much of it, but you know, of the clothing that does exist. The main thing I want to look at is this. The main thing about clothing is that it has thickness to it, and I can see that I actually did sort of add that here. Clothing has planes, so you've got a top plane, which then goes down into the side plane. You can have a front plane, which also transitions back into that side plane, and then within that you've got that other side plane You've also got a bottom plane. Essentially, it has thickness to it. But for the most part, I did do it there, but I'm lacking it everywhere else. If I wanted to fix it, I would probably do something like this. Get those in for the front plane, then think about that thickness of the front plane. Then we've got the top plane here. I wouldn't draw out the entire thing, but just for you know, illustration purposes, I think it explains it better if I make it more three-dimensional. Basically do something like that, and then you would just darken up the lines that would outline the entire shape. And then, of course, you know, draw the ribbon on top. It's actually the same thing with these cuffs that she's wearing, because you can see that these things are just drawn using single lines. But I think it would look better if you also gave those things some depth. So you would do it like this, then have a line going this way instead of directly that way. Because then that means that you can have the extra thickness there, and then you can have your line going that way. And then of course on the other side you would do the same thing. You'd have your drawing like that, with that going down and then up. It's basically like you're drawing just two boxes stacked on top of each other. Then next up, let's look at the hands. So I think the perspective on them is actually pretty decent, which is by complete luck, because there's no way I knew what I was doing perspective wise. Because if we follow the knuckles, I think this would have to be the middle knuckle, which in this case would be the index finger knuckle, so that's a mistake. But I mean, overall that does look kind of decent. And then in this case you would have the knuckles all up there and then the thumb back there. So I mean, that does check out, to be honest. The big thing would be the fingers, because as you can see, there are a lot of weird curves going on here. There's no structure to any of it. And yeah, let's look at it in more detail. So with the fingers, they start from the knuckles, obviously, and then they're divided into 3 sections, which all have 3-dimensionality to them. They have a top plane as well as a side plane, bottom plane. And they also change in size the further down you get. The tallest one would be the first finger, or not the first finger, the first section up there, and then that would be the middle one. That's the smallest one. Now what I did in my drawings is, as you can see, there are only 2 sections. There's one up here and there's one down there. The reason for that is because whenever you draw fingers, you do end up simplifying them into 2 sections. You end up combining these 2, and then the knuckle plus that first section become that part. The idea behind the fingers wasn't wrong, but there's just no 3-dimensionality to it. So in this case, and then I guess this is what we've got now. It still looks kind of messed up, to be honest. Moving on, the next thing that needs to be changed would be the shoulders and the hips. So I think the reason why one shoulder is lower than the other, and the reason why this hip appears to be higher than this one, is because I was trying to go for Contrapposto, which, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of like the natural way for people to stand. So if you're just standing up straight, completely relaxed, you would, for example, raise one of your shoulders, and then the hip on the opposite side would get raised, so then it would look kind of like that, and that would be a more interesting pose than just having somebody stand up straight like a stick figure. And that's what I was trying to go for here. But as you can see, the hips are barely tilted, and then the shoulders do appear tilted, but instead of the shoulders actually being tilted, it looks like there's just some volume missing in this area that does exist in that area. So to fix this, we'd have to start from the guideline phase. Always start by deciding on the tilt there. Then the bottom of the ribcage, well actually the entire ribcage, is going to be following that same tilt. Not always, because the shoulders can actually move independently from the ribcage, but in this case, it's all going to be following the same tilt. And then everything below the hips, or the entirety of the hips, those are all going to be following the same tilt in that direction. Then let's see, from here, usually start with the neck, then... Oh, right, another thing would be the horizon line. That's also kind of an important one, especially when you're trying to go with perspective. The horizon line in this case was, it seems like it's supposed to be somewhere down here, so that's what we're going for. Meaning everything above the horizon line is going to be seen from below, and everything below it is going to be seen from above. Okay, I think that would be it. Something like that might have been what I was trying to go for, but I didn't understand you know, the perspective and all the boxes and the anatomy back then, so this is what we ended up with. So I did a quick redraw of the original, and this is the end result. Now, I think the biggest change between this one and this one is that this drawing was drawn with the horizon line in mind. In the original, the horizon line was right around there, but the drawing wasn't made with that horizon line in mind. So things above it were seen from below, and then things below it were seen as if they were head on. Whereas in this new drawing, the horizon line is somewhere around here, and then everything above it is seen from below, and the things below it are seen from above. And then aside from that, also changed this hand position just to make it look more natural. And then you can see that we actually have the shoulders and the hips tilted, as opposed to the original where it's kind of ambiguous. And then also in the face, a couple things got fixed, like the eyes, ears, and eyebrows all got moved down, but that's about it. So that's it for the video. I'll probably do some more of these in the future because I still have a ton of old drawings that I can use as examples. And if you have any suggestions of things that you want me to cover, let me know in the comments, and I guess I'll catch you all next time.